The capital of the United States, Washington, D.C., was designed to be the political and symbolic heart of the nation. But few know that among its avenues and monuments, there are subtle marks suggesting the presence of a hidden force. Since colonial times, a discreet society composed of some of the most influential men in American history seems to have shaped the country's course. Their legacy is imprinted on the most important documents, in the symbols scattered throughout the government, and perhaps even in the decisions made behind the scenes of power. Could it be that the Freemasons not only helped build the United States, but still control the nation's course? Welcome to another night where mysteries never sleep. I am Midnight, and this is 7 Nights. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for your help. Like the video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it makes a huge difference in helping YouTube deliver these videos to more people and allowing me to continue bringing this content to you. I'm counting on you. Let's get to the video. Since the 18th century, Freemasonry has been established as a discreet society, bringing together intellectuals, political leaders, and military figures. In the United States, its influence began even before independence, when the colonies sought to break free from British rule. Figures like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and Paul Revere were Freemasons, but their involvement in the order went beyond mere membership. Their principles directly influenced the country's formation. Have you ever noticed how some societies always seem to be behind the scenes of major historical events? Well, Freemasonry is one of them. And here in the United States, this influence began even before the country officially existed. The Declaration of Independence, signed in 1776, marked the birth of the United States and reflected ideals that resonated with Freemasonry. Liberty, equality, and fraternity, though associated with the French Revolution, were also present in the teachings of the order. But how were these principles applied in practice? Could Freemasonry have played an active role in creating the new republic? Another fundamental document, the U.S. Constitution, also raises questions about Masonic influence. James Madison, one of its primary authors, had indirect connections to the fraternity, and several participants in the Constitutional Convention were active members. To what extent did Masonic principles help shape the American system of government? Beyond the founding documents, Masonic rituals were incorporated into significant political events. When George Washington was inaugurated as the first president of the United States, he took his oath on a Bible from a Masonic lodge. This seemingly symbolic detail is seen by some scholars as evidence of the order's strong presence in the country's formation. The architecture of the American Capitol also suggests a design influenced by Masonic concepts. Pierre-Charles L'Enfant, the French engineer responsible for Washington, D.C.'s layout, incorporated geometric and esoteric elements into the city. Obelisks, stars, and references to sacred geometry can be seen in major monuments. Were these merely aesthetic choices, or a code understood only by initiates? Another symbolic element is the Great Seal of the United States, adopted in 1782. The unfinished pyramid with the all-seeing eye at the top is often associated with Freemasonry. The inscriptions Annuit Coeptis and Novus Ordo Seclorum generate different interpretations regarding their meaning. Were these symbols chosen for their universal value, or do they carry a deeper message? Even the $1 bill contains intriguing references. Experts in symbolism point out that certain details on the banknote may reflect Masonic ideals, while others believe they are merely historical coincidences. During the American Revolution, many strategic meetings took place within Masonic lodges, away from British surveillance. The famous Boston Tea Party, one of the events symbolizing resistance to English rule, is said to have been planned in such meetings. Paul Revere and other participants were active Freemasons. Did this group merely reflect the society of the time, or did it play a decisive role in the events leading to independence? Even after the United States was consolidated, Masonic influence remained present in politics and government. The cornerstone of the Capitol was laid in a Masonic ceremony led by George Washington. Individually, this event may seem like just a historical milestone, but when combined with other indications, it reinforces the idea that Freemasonry played a significant role in the country's foundation. In the 19th century, with American territorial expansion, many political leaders supported the Manifest Destiny doctrine. Interestingly, several of them were Freemasons. Did Freemasonry see this expansion merely as a national ideal, or also as an opportunity to strengthen its influence? Beyond politics, the order functioned as a powerful network of contacts among politicians, businessmen, and military officials, ensuring strategic alliances throughout history. But was this mutual support merely to promote fraternity among its members, or was there a greater objective behind these connections? Over time, the role of Freemasonry in the U.S. government has become increasingly questioned. While some believe its influence has waned, others argue that it has only become more subtle and strategic. After all, if the order played such a significant role in the nation's founding, why would it relinquish its power so easily? If history teaches us anything, it is that true power is not always visible. And if Freemasonry truly helped build the United States, what other mysteries might be hidden beneath the foundations of this nation? Since the founding of the United States, Freemasonry has exerted a discreet yet striking influence over several presidents. Among the 46 who have occupied the White House, at least 14 were declared Freemasons, while others maintained indirect connections with the order. George Washington, in addition to being the nation's first president, also participated in Masonic ceremonies, including the laying of the Capitol's cornerstone. But what does it mean that so many leaders shared this affiliation? Freemasonry has always emphasized values such as discipline, fraternity, and a commitment to progress, which may explain why many of its members ascended to leadership positions. However, this raises the question, did the fraternity simply shape great leaders, or did its influence help ensure that power remained within its network? One of the most notable examples is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the only American president to serve 4 consecutive terms. He was not only an active Freemason, but also surrounded himself with advisors and cabinet members connected to the order. During his administration, the United States solidified itself as a global superpower and shaped international politics. Were his decisions solely the result of his leadership, or did they reflect the interests of a select group? Harry S. Truman, Roosevelt's successor, was even more deeply involved with Freemasonry, rising to the position of Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Missouri. During his presidency, the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Japan and initiated the Cold War. Did the Masonic Order have any influence on these strategic decisions, or was his affiliation merely a detail of his personal journey? The White House, beyond the presidents who have resided there, has architectural and symbolic connections to Freemasonry. From its construction, workers and architects linked to the order left subtle marks on the building's structure. Geometric patterns and sculptures allude to Masonic concepts, suggesting that the order's influence may have been greater than imagined. Dwight D. Eisenhower governed during one of the most critical periods in American history, marked by the space race and the strengthening of the military-industrial complex. In his farewell address, he warned of the dangers of this complex, a system where corporate and political interests intertwine. Was his speech a warning against the growing corporate influence, or was it a reference to even more discreet forces operating behind the scenes? John F. Kennedy, on the other hand, was not an official Freemason, but he was surrounded by several figures linked to the order. His assassination in 1963 remains shrouded in theories, some of which suggest that he challenged certain influential groups. Although there is no concrete evidence, his death raises questions about who truly controls the direction of American politics. Richard Nixon, despite not being a Freemason, was also surrounded by advisors who belonged to the fraternity. The Watergate scandal, which led to his resignation, still sparks debates about who truly benefited from his downfall. Was it an isolated case of corruption or part of a larger political game? In more recent times, Masonic presence in the White House has become less visible, but does that mean its influence has disappeared? Bill Clinton, for example, was a member of the Order of Demolay, a youth organization linked to Freemasonry. Barack Obama, while not officially a Freemason, attended events and used symbols that some interpret as subtle references. Was this merely coincidence, or a sign of the quiet continuation of this influence? Donald Trump, although not recognized as a Freemason, maintained ties with businessmen and power groups that raise questions about his true position within the system. During his presidency, he presented himself as an opponent of the traditional political elite, but his decisions suggest that his relationship with influential groups may have been more complex than it appeared. The presidential succession in the United States has always followed recurring patterns. The presence of Freemasonry in the White House, whether directly or indirectly, demonstrates that this order has been connected to power since the nation's inception. But does this mean that presidents govern independently, or are there discrete forces guiding their actions? If history has shown us anything, it is that the most visible power is not always the one making the real decisions. But to what extent does this influence remain active today? Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, is not just a political center, but also a space filled with symbolism. From its original design to the monuments erected over the centuries, the city seems to carry encoded messages, details that some consider mere architectural choices, but that others believe reveal the influence of Freemasonry in the construction of American power. If there's one city in the world that looks like a book of secret codes, it's Washington, D.C. Do you think these monuments and designs were placed there by chance? The French engineer Pierre-Charles L'Enfant, responsible for the city's urban design in 1791, conceived an unusual geometric plan in which the avenues and government buildings follow patterns that many associate with esoteric symbolism. Obelisks, pentagrams, and stars are scattered throughout the city, but are these elements merely aesthetic choices, or do they indicate a deeper meaning? The Washington Obelisk, one of the capital's most iconic monuments, has strong ties to Masonic tradition. Officially erected in honor of George Washington, the monument follows the model of Egyptian obelisks, which in esoteric culture represent knowledge and the connection between heaven and earth. For many, this shape was not chosen randomly, but as a tribute to values associated with spiritual enlightenment and power. Another point of interest is the Capitol Dome, where the painting The Apotheosis of Washington is found, depicting the first U.S. president ascending to the heavens, surrounded by allegorical figures representing wisdom and strength. Interpretations of this mural vary. Some see it as a simple tribute, while others suggest it symbolizes the Masonic idea of spiritual elevation and intellectual mastery. Additionally, there are intriguing details in the Capitol's interior architecture. Some rooms feature checkered floor patterns similar to those found in Masonic lodges, where the contrast between light and darkness represents the duality of the world. Were these choices purely decorative, or do they hold a deeper symbolic meaning? Another element that sparks curiosity is the Great Seal of the United States, adopted in 1782 and found on the $1 bill. The unfinished pyramid with the all-seeing eye at the top is associated with concepts of vigilance, knowledge, and stability. The inscription Annuit Coeptus translates to He favors our undertakings, while Novus Ordo Seclorum means New Order of the Ages. Do these phrases simply represent the founding of a new nation, or do they convey a broader message about a long-term plan? The streets of Washington, when viewed from above, form precise geometric patterns, including an incomplete pentagram near the White House. In esoteric tradition, the pentagram can represent balance and protection, but is also associated with other meanings. Is this merely an effect of the city's urban layout, or an intentional detail inserted by planners with symbolic knowledge? The Library of Congress, one of the world's greatest centers of knowledge, also contains enigmatic references. Among its sculptures and frescoes, elements alluding to astrology, secret societies, and esoteric principles can be found. Does this suggest that the knowledge preserved there goes beyond what meets the eye? The U.S. Supreme Court also presents intriguing details. Above its main entrance, there is a sculpture depicting Moses holding the Ten Commandments, surrounded by figures symbolizing justice. Among these representations are images linked to Freemasonry, such as the balance of duality and the torch of enlightenment. Are these symbols merely universal references to justice, or do they indicate a more specific influence? Even the White House, the center of executive power, holds symbolic connections. During its construction, stones carved by Masonic stonemasons were used, some of which still bear discrete marks of the order. Do these historical details indicate mere coincidence, or are they a sign of the fraternity's enduring influence? The presence of these symbols in the American Capitol raises a larger question. Were they intentionally placed to signal Masonic influence, or are they simply reflections of an era when the order played a larger role in society? More importantly, are these hidden messages still understood and utilized today? If history teaches us anything, it is that symbols carry meanings that extend beyond their appearance. But the question remains, are the United States governed solely by what is visible to the public, or do hidden messages and structures indicate a more subtle and lasting influence? In the United States, Political decisions are presented as the result of a democratic process in which Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court play fundamental roles. However, some believe that real power is not in the hands of these public figures, but rather in discrete groups operating far from the spotlight. Since its founding, the U.S. has been influenced by elites who, at various moments, have played a decisive role in shaping the country's direction. Freemasonry, bringing together political leaders, military figures, and businessmen, often appears at the center of these discussions. But to what extent does this organization influence major national decisions? Within Freemasonry, loyalty among members is a fundamental principle. Could this connection serve as a channel of influence in political and economic spheres? If key figures in government, the judiciary, and the financial sector share this fraternity, is it possible that this network has a real impact on the decisions shaping the nation? Beyond political power, the economy also seems to have been influenced by discrete societies. Some of the wealthiest families in the U.S., such as the Rockefellers and the Morgans, maintained close ties with select groups. The American banking system, including the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, had among its architects individuals connected to circles of influence. Is this merely a historical coincidence, or a coordinated effort to keep economic control in the hands of a few? Another intriguing point is the discrete meetings between politicians, business leaders, and influencers. Forums such as the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, and the Bilderberg Conference are events where global leaders discuss strategic topics, often without public transparency. While these meetings are officially described as diplomatic and economic gatherings, critics argue that they could serve as platforms where impactful decisions are made outside public scrutiny. The U.S. intelligence structure also operates at a level of secrecy that raises questions. Since its creation in 1947, the CIA has had directors with indirect connections to discrete societies. The agency acts as a parallel state, conducting operations that are not always understood or approved by the nation's own leaders. Is its role truly to protect the country, or to ensure that certain agendas remain intact? Another factor of influence is the military-industrial complex, which has grown stronger over the decades. In his famous farewell address, Dwight D. Eisenhower warned of the dangers of this power structure, which merges military and corporate interests. Wars and conflicts often result in gains for this sector, raising the question, are U.S. military decisions always based on national security, or are there deeper interests at play? The judicial system also seems to be part of this game of influence. The U.S. Supreme Court, composed of lifetime appointed justices, makes decisions that impact generations. Some members of this court were nominated by presidents tied to networks of influence. If the judiciary is supposed to be impartial, why do certain rulings consistently favor specific groups? The media, in turn, plays a crucial role in shaping public opinion. Today, most major communication networks are owned by a small group of conglomerates. Who decides which stories are amplified and which are ignored? Is the information reaching the public truly free, or is it strategically filtered to shape perceptions? In the realm of technology, mass data collection and control of digital information have become powerful tools. Companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon have unprecedented access to people's lives. If a small group controls this information, who ensures that it is not being used to influence policies and global decisions? And so, an inevitable question arises. If so many key sectors of society have connections with discrete groups like Freemasonry, does this mean that American democracy is merely a facade? To what extent do elections and political debates reflect real decision-making? History teaches us that power rarely reveals itself entirely. But if Freemasonry and other elite societies truly wield influence behind the scenes, what other decisions might be being made beyond the public's view? Since entering politics, Donald Trump has presented himself as a challenger to the traditional elite, an outsider fighting against the so-called deep state. However, his rise to the presidency raises a fundamental question. Did Trump truly oppose the system, or was he part of it all along? Unlike many previous presidents, Trump is not officially recognized as a Freemason, and there are no official records of his membership. Yet, his business and political trajectory placed him in close contact with influential figures linked to power networks. Was this proximity simply a natural consequence of operating in business and politics, or did it suggest something more? His ties to elite circles began long before his presidency. Fred Trump, his father, was a real estate magnate who built strategic relationships with powerful politicians and businessmen. Many of these contacts were part of clubs and discreet organizations, some with historical connections to Freemasonry. Did this network of influence facilitate the rise of the Trump empire? Another intriguing point is the presence of Freemasons and members of other fraternities in Trump's administration. Wilbur Ross, a former banker at Rothschild & Company, served as Secretary of Commerce. Steve Mnuchin, a former Goldman Sachs executive, led the Treasury. Do these appointments reflect mere political strategy, or do they reinforce the idea that certain groups maintain influence regardless of who is president? Additionally, the architecture of Trump's properties raises curiosity. Trump Tower in New York features geometric patterns and symbols that some associate with esoteric elements. Look at that, symbols of power again. Is it just aesthetics or a message for those who understand? His affinity for gold, pyramids, and columns echoes the classical aesthetics of Freemasonry and other secretive societies. But are these merely personal preferences or a tribute to concepts of power and hierarchical occultism? During his presidency, Trump popularized the term deep state, referring to a supposed power structure operating behind the scenes of the government. Many viewed this as an attack on the political and bureaucratic elite, but others question, what if this narrative was just another political move? If Trump truly posed a threat to the system, would he have been able to maintain his influence for so long? Another intriguing factor was his relationship with the American evangelical movement. Powerful religious leaders actively supported him, some with indirect connections to influence networks like Freemasonry. Was this alliance merely an electoral strategy, or part of a broader effort to consolidate power across different sectors of society? Additionally, his participation in high-level events raises questions. Despite positioning himself as an opponent of the globalist elite, Trump attended the World Economic Forum, where political and business leaders discuss global strategies. If he was truly against these structures, why was he present in these spaces? The COVID-19 pandemic brought new challenges to his administration and reinforced the influence of major corporations and financial institutions. Tech companies and pharmaceutical giants emerged stronger, raising doubts about who truly benefited from political decisions during that period. Did Trump act independently, or did he serve entrenched interests within the system? Upon leaving office, Trump claimed there was a conspiracy to remove him from power. But what if this conspiracy was even larger than he imagined? If the system were truly controlled by a discrete network of influence, was Trump a victim, or a well-placed piece on the board? What is certain is that even after leaving office, Trump remains a polarizing and mysterious figure. His rhetoric against the elite made him a symbol of resistance for many, but the connections and decisions of his administration suggest that behind-the-scenes politics may be more complex than it appears. If Freemasonry indeed holds influence in the upper echelons of American power, was Donald Trump an unexpected challenger, or just another face in the same silent game that has shaped the United States for centuries? Since its founding, the United States has positioned itself as a nation of freedom and opportunity. However, some theories suggest that behind this narrative lies a carefully crafted plan by a discrete elite. Societies like Freemasonry are often mentioned in discussions about the creation of a new world order, a concept involving the consolidation of a unified global government. But how much of this idea is based on facts? The phrase New World Order has been mentioned by several American leaders. In 1991, George H.W. Bush used the term while discussing a new global system in the post-Cold War era. Was he merely referring to political and economic shifts, or was he signaling a larger transition in the balance of power? The idea of global governance, controlled by a select group, has always been present in theories about secret societies. Freemasonry, with its hierarchical structure and emphasis on fraternity among influential members, could have the foundations to operate on a global level. But does this mean the order is actively pursuing such a goal? With the advancement of globalization, international organizations have emerged, making decisions that impact millions of people. The World Economic Forum, the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, and the Trilateral Commission frequently gather political and business leaders. Many of their members have connections to Freemasonry or other influential networks. Is this proximity merely a natural reflection of elite interactions, or does it indicate a coordinated strategy? The global financial system also raises questions. The Federal Reserve, created in 1913, operates independently of the U.S. government, allowing its decisions to impact not just the American economy but global markets. The bankers who helped design this system had connections to elite groups. Was this simply a historical coincidence, or a calculated move to consolidate economic control in the hands of a few? Technology plays an increasingly crucial role in this scenario. The rise of digital surveillance, mass data collection, and information control has created an environment where a few groups have unprecedented access to people's lives. Companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon wield enormous power over the flow of information. If a small elite controls these resources, who ensures they aren't being used to shape societies according to a specific agenda? International conflicts also have a direct impact on the consolidation of global power. Throughout history, wars and crises have often resulted in new regulations and geopolitical shifts. After periods of instability, governments and international institutions tend to expand their influence in the name of security and order. Do these events occur naturally, or are they encouraged by those seeking greater control over global affairs? The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated these changes even further. The strengthening of international organizations, increased government intervention, and the digitalization of economies have transformed how societies function. Some of these transformations have directly benefited major corporations and strategic sectors. Were these changes merely responses to a crisis, or do they indicate the advancement of a long-term plan? Freemasonry has always presented itself as an order dedicated to knowledge and progress. If a plan for a new world order truly exists, it may not necessarily be a negative one, but rather a vision in which a select group believes it is best suited to guide humanity. However, the fundamental question remains: who determined that this group should have such responsibility? And what are their true interests? In the United States, the growing power of the executive branch, corporate influence over the government, and control of information suggest that democracy may be becoming little more than an illusion. The public votes, debates ideas, and follows the news, yet the most significant decisions seem to be made in spheres inaccessible to the people. The New World Order, whether a concrete plan or just a widely debated concept, raises more questions than answers. But history has shown that there have always been groups seeking control over society. If Freemasonry is indeed shaping the future of the United States and the world, does this mark the beginning of a new era, or the consolidation of absolute power? The influence of Freemasonry in the United States is a topic that sparks both fascination and unease. Since the country's founding, symbols, rituals, and hidden connections suggest that this discreet society has played a role in the most crucial moments of American history. Presidents, judges, bankers, and military leaders have passed through its circles, making decisions that shaped the nation's destiny. But how much of this influence still remains? Is Freemasonry merely a fraternity focused on personal growth and philanthropy, or a silent force operating behind the scenes of power? If history teaches us anything, it's that real power rarely exposes itself. What is visible may only be the surface of something much larger, a game of influence that has been unfolding for centuries. If Freemasonry truly helped build the United States, what else might be hidden beneath the foundations of this nation? This story is just one piece. One day, perhaps you will see the entire puzzle. If this made you think, subscribe and like the video. It helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share. After all, more voices mean more discoveries.